Hey, good evening, everyone. So tonight, as promised, we're going to have a look at glazing. So we're going to work on that librarian. But before I start, let me just start my playlist here. So here we go. So the librarian is the model we're going to be working on. I thought the sword was a good thing to look at for glazing techniques. So couple of things for tonight. Because in glazing, let me adjust the volume here. This is way too loud. Alright, this is much better. So in glazing, the wet palette is actually super important. So I know you cannot see everything, but the important thing is you're going to be able to see my paint dilution and how I move my brush around the palette, because this is actually important in glazing. So we're going to do a power sword, and we're going to do that power sword by glazing it. So the main color for the power sword is going to be blue. This is a different blue than the blue I use for the armor. We're going to use black, and we're going to use bright ivory. So keeping it super easy. And that blue is going to be the middle color for our sword. So I'm going to shake that up, and since we're going to use a whole lot of blue, I'm going to do 3 puddles of blue on the palette. So the first puddle is going to be for use with black. The second one is going to be for use with just the pure blue. And the third one is going to be for use with ivory. Now, doing a puddle of black right around here. And then puddle of bright ivory at the other end of the palette. Whoops, this is getting out of hand. Alright. Obviously there's a lot of paint wasted here, but whatever, it's not a big deal. So other than that, there's a magical thing that we need that you might not be able to see very easily here. This is just a paper towel, because I'm going to damp my brush on this pretty much all the time. You need a pot of clean water. That pot of clean water is going to be used to dilute your paint as you go, and you need a sheety brush. So you need a brush to do the mix in the color. So hopefully this allows you to see everything quite nicely. I'm going to start by putting a little bit of blue aside here. Even if I'm going pure blue, I'm still putting a puddle on the side because I'm diluting this blue quite a lot. So because of that, I want to keep some blue much stronger. And as you can see here, Pro Acryl blue is actually incredibly strong a color. So this is why you use a different pot of water to clean your brush. Alright, other super important thing is you need a soft brush. So if you're using brush that the bristles are basically too stiff on, the issue that is going to cause is that since we're going to do very thin layer of paint, when you're going to come with your brush on your thin layer of paint, even if it's dry, you're actually going to tear the paint up, and it's going to build texture. Now before I start here, there's one important thing everybody need to remember is I am not myself a master of that technique. So it is very possible that I do some mistakes here that I need to fix, but whatever. So I'm going to start by putting that first coat of paint on that mini, and we're just going to do the blue coat. I'm starting with what is going to be the middle tone here, so pure blue in this case, making sure that the whole sword has that color on. Making sure that everything is covered. This is going to require multiple coats as usual. Then the next one I might not use the diluted blue, so I need to go under as well. Now the sword hilt is not painted, so we have the luxury of not caring about it. Yeah, my paint is slightly too diluted to be used as a base coat here, but this is not much of a problem. It's just going to be a little bit longer for the dry. So sorry, this is not visible on camera right now. The angle on that specific model is a little bit awkward. So we're going for a blue power weapon, basically. All right, so this is going to take a little while to dry. Going to hit pause on the video, let that thing dry, and we'll come back with another coat. Actually, I'm going to fully cover the sword with the middle tone before, so that I don't waste you guys' time on video. All right, I'll see you in a couple of seconds, for myself in a couple of minutes. All right, so I am back. So I did the base blue color on the whole sword here. Now, one important thing is, normally when you do a power sword, you do like every half of the sword separately, because you do basically light reflection on one side that's different on the other side. So basically, painting one blade like this is like painting 4 different things. Now, the point here is to show glazing, and this is a commission mini that I decided to upgrade for the client because it was convenient for myself, right? So I'm not going to do 4 panels on that one. I'm going to paint the whole thing identical on both sides for one blade, and identical in the under part as well. So what we're going to do is, in this case, the point is glazing, not so much power sword, right? So we're going to do darker part on that side of the blade here, and then we're going to come over here and do lighter part. Now we need to do small jumps in color. So start by doing a little bit of blue, actually quite a lot of blue, with just a tiny bit amount of black. Just a tiny. Going to mix this together. This is giving kind of a darker blue. Now that jump in color right now is rather big, but that is not too much of an issue, because I'm going to clean the brush. Now, sorry you can't see the full definition, but at least you can see the shade of blue that I'm going for. Now I'm going for the water, and we're going to water down that paint quite a bit. Before I go any further, I'm cleaning the brush. And making sure my brush is dry here. Picking up a little bit of that blue color, which is a lot darker. I'm going to damp it here. So the damping stage is actually super important. Now in glazing, we're going to pull the brush towards where we want the most paint to be accumulated. So the bottom here, we want to be... oh, I have to be careful. There's some blue here. I don't want to destroy the mini. So I have to be extra careful here. I'm going to switch this. Okay, so the bottom here is going to be darker than the top. So since we have a dark color right now, we need to pull towards the bottom of the blade. The reason for that is that there's just more paint that's going to accumulate at the end towards which we're pulling. There's basically a drop of water that's going to build up toward the end at which we're pulling the brush to. Alright, so not too much, and don't overwork that paint. So right now, as you can see, maybe it's not super visible in the camera, but there's already a rather much darker shade that is visible on that blade. So I'm going to clean the brush, make sure that my brush is clean, and before we go back on there, we need to make sure that this thing's dry. So basically this means in our case, we're going to move to another part of the blade before coming back. So I'm going to do the under part real quick here. Not going to be super into details here, because this is the under part of the blade that is mostly not going to be seen. And again, the point is to show glazing. And this is a commission mini that is getting quite a bump in the job quality that it was supposed to receive. Making sure that the paint is about the same distance on the sword on both sides. Going to put a little bit on the flat of the blade as well. Okay, cleaning the brush. So important thing, we need to make sure that everything is dry at all time before going back. So this definitely looks dry. Going to load the paint with a little bit more of that blue. Going to damp it. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go a little bit, just a little tiny bit higher. And we're going to bring it down all the way to the bottom. So the tiny bit higher that I'm just doing there is going to be very slightly brighter than what we have at the bottom of the sword. The reason for this is very simple. The bottom of the sword has 2 coats, and the top part that we've just done here has a single coat, right? So this is not science, basically, as Kenny would say. So same thing on the other side, damping the brush. Now starting about here, pulling my paint towards the bottom. I'm sorry this side is a little bit hard to see, but I still need to do an actual paint job on that mini, so I'm going to paint it since I'm at it, basically. And we need to get the other side to dry anyway, so this is not much of a big deal. Okay, so we have the bottom part of the sword here that is starting to be a lot darker. This is visible on the camera. I'm going to adjust the exposure here so that it can be seen more easily. The palette is probably going to go super freaking bright here. So is my hand. But as you can see, there's definitely a shift of color going on here. Alright, so don't want to burn your retinas, so I'm going to pull that back where it was. And I'm taking a little bit more of that paint, damping it. And now I'm going to concentrate towards more of the bottom of the paint. This is another coat that we're doing, so that's going to be even darker. Alright. Don't forget to pull the paint towards where you want most of that color to be. So we want the bottom of the sword to be darker. We need to pull towards the bottom of the sword. Now doing same thing on the other side of the blade. The important thing here is to damp your brush. Use a soft brush. Make sure that everything is actually dry before you go back with the brush. If it's not dry, it's not going to work nicely. And do not overwork the paint. If you overwork the paint, you're going to get fucked. Alright. So, now we have a relatively harsh transition here. That transition is currently dry. This is currently drying. So what we have here on this side of the sword is pure blue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the pure blue we had previously, the one that was super diluted. I'm going to damp it a lot. Now that makes a blue that is going to be almost transparent on application. So this is how watery that blue is. So I'm going to damp it a little bit more. And we're going to work with the side of the brush here. So blue is this side, the darker side is that side. So right at the frontier of both color. I'm coming with the side of the brush and just a little bit here, not much, just a tiny little bit. Working with the side of the brush. I'm letting the paint dry like that. Doing same thing on that side. Alright, and we let dry. Now if you look on the camera, the transition is already a lot smoother there. And this is perfectly fine, that's what we're looking for. Alright, so now we need a darker blue to do the base of this sword. Now obviously when I do the sword, I'm going to, like that shiny thing here that's on the top, I'm going to do like non-metallic metal gold or something like that. But right now we're working on the blue, and the non-metallic metal is going to be for another day. So some blue, and we want a whole lot of black here. We want a shade of blue that is much darker than this one. This looks somewhat good. And it's important to keep your colors, because when you go back to smooth out the blendings, you do need to go back to like previous shades of your colors and stuff like that, right? So if you don't keep the previous colors that you were working with, it's kind of harder to go back and fix those blends, right? Glazing is a game of back and forth, so you have to keep your previous colors. Basically, when I'm preparing for the stream, and I know I'm going to be doing that, I'm using a brand new wet palette, and usually if you are careful, when we do that type of things on the stream, that is all we do all night. Like, I'm not doing something else on top of it, because I'm not switching my wet palette paper. Alright, so this is a shade we're playing with. Don't forget to pull towards the bottom. So we're going to start, say, around here. And I'm pulling toward the bottom of the sword. This is much darker. Same thing on the under part. Not forget to do the blade. And let dry. So we have a darker part here. Cleaning the brush. As this dry, we're going back to the pure blue. Damping the brush. And we're going to work again on that transition here with the side of the brush. And let dry. Do not overwork the color. If you overwork the color, you're going to see texture appear. Like usually when you see like badly looking, because it never looks really good when texture appears in glaze, unless like it's your objective. But usually when you see texture appearing in a glaze, it's not a good sign. It means that your paint were not dry when you worked on it, or that your paintbrush bristles were basically too strong, right? All right. So now, in the end, I could have used only one puddle, but I decided to play safe. So, okay. So now I'm going to start mixing a brighter blue, and it's harder to glaze brighter color than it is to glaze darker color. You have a tendency to leave more watermark with lighter color. So I'm going to be gentle here, not too much, because I don't want to have too much of a jump in the color. Alright, this should be gentle enough. Now, the more color mix that you're doing, the best the transition is going to be, and the less work the transition are going to require. Because since you're working with colors that are so thin, they basically end up merging one with another and blending one with another rather easily. Alright, so I'm diluting this quite a lot. Cleaning the brush. Loading the brush. Damping the brush. Working with the side of the brush from, say, about here. As you see, this is already drying. Like, this is so thin, and it blended together like almost magically. There's going to be a little bit of work on that blend, but not that much. The jumping color is small enough, and the paint is thin enough that when it dries, it's going to dry in mostly a nice way. Alright, and let dry. So as you can see, the tip here there's a little bit of a color jump there, but it's nothing that cannot be dealt with. Alright, now go back to the much darker color that we had moments ago. We're going to let the tip of that sword dry. We're coming for another coat of the more darker blue color towards the base here. And it's okay to be a little bit blotchy here. The paint is extremely thin, like you're not going to lose details over what you're doing here, even if you're not too careful with the application of the paint. Or you're mostly not going to lose details. Alright, so I'm going to let that dry. While this dries, we're going to go back to the tip of the sword. Same blue color we had moments ago. Loading the brush. Damping of the brush. Always super important. We're going to go a little bit more towards the tip here. That one was a little bit too long. No big deal. All right, go to this side. All right, as you can see, this is already starting to look the part. Maybe the camera doesn't show it, but the effect is already rather nicely present there. So cleaning the brush. That's the probably most important thing to do. Now this is not yet dry, so I'm going to go back to pure blue. And we're going to do a little bit more work on the transition that we have around here. Now this is getting there. I'm going to make sure my brush is really not too moist. That transition over here is actually pretty nice. You need to be careful in controlling that paint because you don't want to go over the lighter blue that we did a moment before. Okay. Okay, going to let that be. Then the tip is dry and ready for another coat. So as you can see, we currently have kind of a nice gradient building in there. Going for another coat of that brighter blue. and let dry. Okay, so I want the gradient to be stronger towards the bottom. So I'm going to mix an even darker shade of that blue. So literally 1 dot of blue, maybe 2 because I do need some quantity, but mostly black. So this is the darker shade that we worked with up to now. Cleaning the brush. Coming in with water. Quite a lot. Cleaning the brush. It's very much a game of brush cleaning. So right now what I do is I have, and I can never do that on stream because I'm running out of space, but I have on one side I've got clean water, and on the other side I've got the dirty water. Okay, damping. This is almost black. And just at the bottom here. Not more than that. Just the bottom that we want to get like very, very, very dark. Direction in which the brush goes is super important. Okay, and then we let dry. Cleaning the brush. And then we're going to mix a brighter shade of blue. I'm going to be a little bit more aggressive here with the ivory. Hopefully this is not too big of a jump. Worst case, we're going to rework that color. I think we can do a bit of a stronger jump than that. Yeah, I think this is good. Going to clean the brush. Now I have a tendency of doing too big jumps when I'm mixing my colors. So bad habit. I need to watch myself when I do that. Okay, so a lot of water, but I'm not going to mix the water with the full pot of paint because sometimes you need thicker paint on your way. So I'm going to let like the left side of the puddle here not diluted or less diluted. All right, loading that paintbrush, damping this. That's a pretty big jump, but I think we're good. So I'm going to start around here with the side of the brush again. And don't overwork, you let the paint do the work. Let's see how this dries. Just apply the paint and you wait. You don't do anything more than that. So while this is drying, we're going to come back with the previous color, damping, and we're going to work on that transition right here that is slightly harsh. Again, direction of the brush is super important. And let it dry. Don't be tempted to go back and fix things until it's dry. Like, you don't need to fix anything until it's dry, because before it actually is dry, you have no idea how it's going to look. So do not be tempted to go back and fix things. So you might not have to. All right. So I'm coming back with that brighter blue. damping this brush. And I'm going to go a little bit farther from here. It's a little bit deeper than what it was previously. Now note that I use the tip of the brush and not the side of it here. Sometimes this can help getting a decent getting a decent transition in color. Now we're going to allow this to dry. And I'm going back to one of our previous color. And continue working on that transition here. This is just a tiny bit of attention. It's not so required right now. And I'm working on the brighter blue a little bit as well here, because it's kind of dry, so. The transition at the tip on the bottom is actually nicer than the one I have on the top at the moment. That's rather interesting. I'm going to keep going at that previous blue color. And I'm going to work it up a little bit here. This works nicely, so I'm going to replicate it. That's what I did at the bottom, and I like what it gave, so I'm going to work in that way for the top. But we do need to wait for this to dry. Alright, while this dry, I'm going to mix an even brighter shade of blue. Try and make this guy like almost baby blue. Or normally you should try using a bad brush for your color mixing, because this is pretty bad for your brushes. So that's actually what I'm going to do, because I don't want to kill this one. Alright, let's clean this, and let's get the bad brush out. Okay, so this, in contrast with the original blue, is quite strong. Going to add some water to it. Clean the brush. All right, so the bottom transition is actually pretty good. The top one right now I'm still not too happy with. So I'm going to come back with that lighter color. There's almost no paint left on that brush. We're going to work at that transition up to the point where we're actually happy with it. And this is a big game of back and forth. There's basically no secret there. It's all a thing of back and forth. Now this is not quite dry. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mix a little bit with the previous color. There's a little bit of wet blending here. That will help with the transition. Alright, let's let that dry a bit. Waiting for paint to dry is the one thing that is is long. There's a lot of people that keep hair dryer beside their desk when they do this, so that they can just blow hair on the Mini. I don't typically do that. Not that I don't think it's a good idea. I think it's a fantastic idea. It's just not practical for me. Okay, so I'm going to go to that much brighter blue shade. And I'm going to work just the tip here on that side. And I'm going to let dry. This side is ready as well. So the transition here is better than it was. I'm going to come back with some of the pure blue right in the middle of the sword. Because the middle at the moment is kind of going a little bit everywhere. Then as this is drying, I'm going with our kind of slightly lighter blue. On both sides. And let dry. And now I'm going with the lighter blue, but not the super light one. And I'm going to work on the transition that we have here at the tip. Make this smoother. I've been so blind, just lost my mind. But not overwork it. The not overwork it is the thing that is like the most important thing. It's really, really tempting to work a color too much. And let dry. So as you currently see, we have kind of a cool gradient going from almost black to much brighter blue. This is still not dry. So I'll go with that brighter blue again. I'll fix part of the gradient that we have around here. And back and forth. Not overworking the paint. If you overwork your paint, you're not going to like the result. I'm not going to do any more work for now on the under part. I'm going to deal with the top part because I've got a bit of a situation going. I'm not extremely happy with the result. And the bottom part, I feel, is mostly good. Like the bottom actually looked better than the top, which is always annoying. Hopefully the top part can be brought back. Now it becomes a game of wait and look dry, watch paint dry. Going to work on the tip while this is going on. Tip is actually ready to go for another coat. And sit and let dry. Going to pure blue, just a little bit of it on that transition that we have here. And going back for the tip color. This is very, very damp. There's close to no paint in the brush. Let dry. Previous color. Almost no paint. And let dry. Oh, this was a mistake. The last brush stroke I did was not in the correct direction here. Let this sit and dry. Need to help it dry a little bit. Alright, going back to our slightly light blue, but mostly pure blue. And let dry. Hopefully this is going to be good to go after. So I'm going to mix another much brighter blue here. Okay, this is very, very bright. Cleaning up the brush. I'm a little bit sad with my top transition. The bottom is a lot better. The bottom is a lot smoother. So basically this is sometimes something that sucks a little bit in miniature painting. If you look at the transition that we have under here, that one is almost seamless. That one is far from perfect actually. It looks good if you look quickly, but it's not perfect. Bottom line is you need to go and do back and forth on your paint like that until you reach what you're looking for. And wait for the thing to be perfectly dry before you go back. So otherwise creating more problem than anything else. So I'm going to do the tip here. Currently diluting that paint. There's almost no paint in the brush. Brush is mostly dry. Just the very tip. Going to dry very quickly. Going to do the same thing bottom. Yeah, that one was good. That's almost dry as well. So, going back with this blue here, that I'm going to add a lot more water to it. Damping it. Still hoping to get a transition that I like around here. I think this one might actually be correct. Yeah, this was watery enough that it should be should actually be pretty good. I think that might have brought back my sword, which I'm happy about. Going back to that very, very bright blue, just for the tip, and let the tip dry. Now it is much easier to do decent transition on smaller parts than it is to do decent transition on larger parts. Okay, going back to my watery blue here. For another go around this area here. Oh yeah, I think this one is good. I think I just fixed it, which is perfect. And then, with this guy, adding a lot of water to it. And it's very, very important to keep in mind where is the brush when the brush leaves the mini. The point where the brush leaves the mini is the point that is going to be the strongest, basically. A lot of water. Mostly, yep. Working that tip. Going to let that dry. I don't want to overwork it. Now the top transition is not going to be perfect, but it's getting there. Going back to previous color here. Let dry. Then other color. For the other color, I'm going to be slightly more aggressive here. I want the tip to be slightly larger than what it is at the moment. Like the brighter part of the tip, I want it a little bit a bigger area. And let dry. Much brighter color here. Don't want to be overly aggressive with this one, but I still want it to show. Should dry nicely. That one was very, very, very diluted. Need to add a lot more water here. Damping the brush quite a bit. And now I'm going to cover a bit of a larger area. And let dry. Just like that. Back to previous color. Now the thing is, when you're doing something like that, sometimes it goes like number one and everything is perfectly fine, and other times you don't get it from the first time, like I did there. Like the bottom of the sword, as we saw earlier, the bottom is actually pretty good. The top requires a little bit more work still. But we're getting there. Just need to let that thing dry. Alright, and I'm working my way up in the colors. And hopefully this is good. I think we're pretty much there now. Going to let dry. Sometimes it doesn't dry exactly the way you want it to dry. Now, since we're at it, I'm going to load some heavy body on the palette using a shitty brush. We don't need a lot, just a tiny bit. Going to add some blue to it. Might need to add some more white. I do need that to be super bright. The Pro Acryl blue is disturbingly strong. Cleaning the brush here. Yeah, the Pro Acryl blue is extremely strong, so I'm going to load some of that white straight on the palette. I'm going to work on that mix. Adding a lot more white. Alright, this should be good enough for us. Don't need the whole lot, just a tiny bit. let's look at that. So the paint here did not dry exactly how I wanted it. I'm going to go back. The thing is, right now the pigments in the paint are starting to, there's too much water in there. So it's basically the palette is in a little bit of a sketchy position, but we should be good to fix this. This should be a very, very minor fix. Alright, so if you look at the bottom is good. Everything looks as it should. The top is getting there. The mistake that I had on the top is that the step in colors that I did was basically too big. And I handled the issue better on the under part. On the top part, it was a little bit sketchier to fix, but that is what happened. So now I'm going to Monument 00. We're going to highlight part of that blade with our thick paint. If you've been following me for a little while, you know I like to use extremely thick paint for highlights. That's why I use the Everybody White here. The sculpt, the blade itself is not super sharp, so I do have to be careful. Not just dirty up the blade. Okay. So we've got a cool highlight going here. Going to clean the brush a little bit. Going back into that heavy body paint. This side is nicer. The plastic is basically smoother. As I explained on stream yesterday, that mini was not meant for a better quality paint job. But in the end, it's getting a better paint job. So originally, the plastic was not cleaned up as nicely as what I would normally do. This is why some parts of that sword are not super, like the plastic is a little bit rough in some areas. Super flat here. And I think this is where I'm going to stop this guy, because I don't want to run the risk of ruining the blend, and I don't want to repaint that sword either. So bottom of the sword, super nice. Top of the sword is a little bit rougher, but still makes for a pretty cool effect. And that was done without an airbrush. So obviously that type of technique requires a lot of practice, a lot more practice than what I have. With that, this for me is still, I'm still learning this basically. But as you can see, if you're working really, really thin paint, it is possible to do a pretty decent transition with your brush on a model. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. I'm sorry for the struggle here, but I mean, as promised on the Patreon, I'm showing stuff that I am myself learning, and this is so that I push myself. So from time to time, I do struggle on parts of a Mini, and I do have to go back. I sure wish that the top part would be as good as the bottom one, but you know what? I'm rather happy with the top part at the moment. So that's it. Thank you for watching, and if you have any question, you just have to let me know, and I'll try to do everything I can to answer these questions. I hope you have a good night, and I'll see you later.